Okay, this work comes from Josephine Key, who wrote Back Pain, a Movement Problem. And one of the ways that she gets people to find control at the sacrolumbar junction and to be able to isolate either the ring of the ribs or the ring of the head is to lie onto your side. Because when you lie on your side, it's a pattern we're not used to, and it confuses the nervous system, so we get to reset a pattern, relearn. So I find it really useful to get people to learn how to initiate the movement of the pelvis up through the spine from the base of the spine. So the knees can be bent at the hips a little bit. You can use a pillow or something under your head, your hand under your head, so that you're comfortable. And the first movement is anterior and posterior tilt of the pelvis. So the tail, the little tip of the tail, will curl under, sitting bones move together, and the lower back rounds a little bit, and then moving the sitting bones back, letting them broaden, feeling the lower back arch. Now what you'll feel here is quite a bit of work in the lower back. So we're going to want to tone that down a tiny bit. Sit bones together, tail curls under, and then as the sitting bones move back, the feeling is of bringing the knees up to the chest. That engages the hip flexors, and as you deepen this crease, you allow the bum to spread backward. That shares the work from the lower back muscles also with the hip flexors, and it gets a deeper, more central feeling. So we practice that, and then once you've isolated from the pelvis, we can then let that sequence right up into the spine. So you allow the rest of the spine to move. What we want to avoid, though, is when people initiate from the rib cage first. Okay, so that's pattern number one. The next pattern is a lateral hip hike. So we've just gone posterior and anterior with the pelvis, which are Joe Key's patterns number 1 and number 2. Now we're doing a lateral hip hike. So the lower back stays in neutral, and we're not going to be moving in that plane of movement. We're going to be moving along this plane of movement. So the feeling is of drawing back through the top sit bone, of hiking that sit bone up, and the pelvis almost becomes like a wheel that rolls me in the direction of the head end of the mat, and then that sitting bone reaches down toward the foot end of the mat. So it's literally as if the pelvis is a wheel. Now I see a lot of people, when they reach down, they tuck their tail. So avoiding moving the pelvis anterior or posterior, just finding this ability to find this lateral hip hike, and then eventually allowing that to sequence through the spine. So what you'll notice about my head is if it were against a wall, it would bump into the wall when the sit bone goes up, and it would retract away from the wall when the sit bone goes down. It actually feels really nice right up through the spine. You can feel the sacrum move almost like the hub of the wheel. So the little torch is going down and little torch up. And this last pattern in the third plane of movement is rotation. So I like to put the top hand on the top hip, keep the spine fairly neutral, push the top hip forward, and you can see the top of the pelvis is rotating. This leg is just going for a ride, and then draw that top hip backward, and the pelvis rotates backward. So the initiation point is from those sitting bones. Again, we're not tucking the tailbone or flaring, keeping a fairly neutral curve to the spine. And really, the origination of the movement, as I feel it, is from the lower leg and lower hip joint. So here the groin kind of squeezes together to draw the pelvis toward the bottom thigh, and then I feel my bottom thigh pressing to the floor and move the pelvis away. Now once you've got that initiation, you can begin to sequence, and I almost imagine myself in like a piece of seaweed in the ocean, just letting the upper body follow the wave of the lower body. I like to put my hand on my heart so I get a sense of the whole thoracic cavity and head following that pelvic movement. Feels really rather nice. And try that, all 3 patterns on the other side.